And you're ready to talk AI, okay? One of my favorite topics. So we have a really, really, really good panel today, and we have a very complicated topic, of course, to talk about AI, right? I work for a company that has a little piece of the AI space. We work with companies across what I call the AI stack. You know, semiconductor tool makers, front-end manufacturers, systems integrators, language model developers, cloud providers, application developers. So AI is this really huge topic, but you know, here we are 2 years after ChatGPT was released, and you know, U.S. and China are at the middle of this AI revolution, right? So it's a very, very topical topic we have today. I want to talk a little bit at some point about and express solidarity with some of the comments at the last panel that Mitch Presnick made and Geyer from NEO, because I think AI really does force us to sort of think in a new way. And it's tricky when you talk about U.S. China because AI has become such a sensitive and sort of loaded issue, as we'll get to. But I think we have a great panel today to talk about different angles on this. And so I wanted to start with, I guess we can do brief introductions for the panelists. And then I want to start with sort of the state of where, you know, what do we mean by AI right now, and how are people thinking about this? Because again, trying to hone in on some of these really tricky topics, it's such a big idea, AI, and I want to get the panelist view of sort of where we are, particularly 2 years after ChatGPT. So let's start with introductions. Let's start with Jeannette on the end. Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeannette Wing. I'm the Executive Vice President for Research and Professor of Computer Science at Columbia University.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you, George, Susan, and Sunny for the invitation. I'm the founding partner of AMINO Capital. 12 years ago, we started, and in Palo Alto. I'm glad to be here.
Hello, everyone. This is Che. I'm principal data scientist at AllianceBernstein. So at AB, my responsibility involves developing and applying different NLP tools and apply those tools for different line of businesses.
Super, super. So you can see, you know, we have this a really good mix of sort of academic viewpoints, investing, and sort of practitioners in the field here. So again, I think we can't sort of wake up each morning without sort of running into some angle on artificial intelligence. I'm waiting, for example, for Apple Intelligence, the beta version, the next beta version, so I can install it on my iPhone. Baidu yesterday announced that it was pursuing some smart glasses at Baidu World in China. I'll be heading over to China next week to talk AI with lots of different people. So AI is sort of it's sort of the flavor of the day, but really the sort of technologies and the sectors and the disciplines that it spans are really kind of mind-boggling. So I thought it would be useful to start off with sort of, you know, what is the current state of AI from your optic, from each of the panelists' optic? Because again, everybody's bringing a little different lens to this topic, just in general in the technology, and then also, as we'll get, you know, sort of the geopolitics around AI have become increasingly complicated, of course, in the last 2 years. And arguably, AI is one of those issues right now at the center of U.S. China relations in some sense, and we can talk more about that. But I'd like to get a sense of how people and practitioners and people who are analyzing different aspects of the industry are thinking about AI as we sit here in November of 2024. So Jeannette, maybe you can start off.
Thank you. First of all, I don't want to sound professorial, but I do want to take you through a little history of AI, because AI is not a new thing. I think AI, modern AI, actually started back in 1956, where there was a conference at Dartmouth, and that was when the term artificial intelligence was born. And the first wave of AI through the 70s and 80s was a technique we call rule-based reasoning, where you wrote a whole bunch of rules that tried to capture all the knowledge that you could, and you did some inference based on those rules, and then you could, you know, discover some new fact from those rules and those that knowledge base. That didn't scale. There were some expert systems that were deployed even in the medical setting, but it just didn't scale. And then around the late 90s, early 2000s, statistical machine learning really took off, and that was all driven by data. Data. So digitizing all the data in the world enabled a new approach to artificial intelligence, which is all data-driven. And at the same time, Moore's law got to the point where we could amass humongous data centers. And so the power of big compute and big data enabled an algorithm that actually came out of the 80s, was invented, if you will, in the 80s and even before, took off. And that was neural networks. And I was actually a colleague of Jeff Hinton at Carnegie Mellon University in the 80s. And he had this wild idea that he'd build a computer that kind of looked like a brain. And we kind of laughed at him. We didn't. But he's the kind of scientist that you stick with your idea and you work for decades. And then by 2012, 2011, it really took off. The big compute, big data, and neural networks, and that is a second wave. And in fact, 2 years ago, when ChatGPT came out, that technology is built on neural networks and other kinds of fancy architectures. But I can say that 2 years ago hit the computer science community by surprise. It was like a tsunami. So we continue to be surprised at how large language models and generative AI has really taken off and is already transforming so many sectors. But I can say this is just the second wave. And I'm happy to talk to you about what I think the third wave of AI will be, but we'll save that for later.
No, that's great. And I didn't mean to imply that AI was 2 years old. I mean, if we'd been having this conversation 6 years ago, we would have been talking about AlphaGo, right? And we would have been talking about sort of that era of when people thought about that, and also AlphaFold, again, which was coming from a very different part of the sort of AI spectrum. And so now everybody thinks large language models and Gen AI and ChatGPT are AI, but absolutely good point that AI is more than one thing. So, and I'm really eager to hear about the third
by
wave.
the way, just because you mentioned AlphaFold, I think that AlphaFold has actually transformed science in a huge way. And AlphaFold was not based on large language models.
No, not at all. Right, good point. No, and in my previous job, I worked very closely with Google DeepMind, and really very amazing, coming from a very different.
Plus, they get Nobel Prizes in chemistry for that.
Right, great. No, that's great. So, Larry, maybe you can also. I'm maybe a little background on your sort of, how you came to be entangled in what we're calling AI, and how you think about sort of where the state of the field is, given all the, all these issues that sort of public perception versus the investor perception. Lots of things going on here.
Yeah, my office is in the heart of Silicon Valley, Palo Alto. But my opinion will not representing the Silicon Valley VC. Because the good VC, like a good entrepreneur, we are contrarians, outliers. 80% of the VC don't make a lot of money. Just like 80% of the startup will die in 5 years. So my opinion, mostly representing my firm, not really the general opinion of Silicon Valley. So here's something new, probably. Number one, AI, to my opinion, is becoming a utility. So all of us here, you shouldn't be worried or try to learn as fast as possible about the technology of AI. Learn what's new. How are you going to use it? So AI, just if you get out of this room today, remember this thing, that might change our life. AI is becoming utility. This year, next year, and ever after, happy ever after. If you build anything without AI, just like you are building a house without electricity, without water. Try to utilize AI. As of the technology, most of us, you don't need to worry about it. Just like you don't need to worry about how electricity is generated. So that's the key. Think about it as a utility. And the people who make most of the money are the people who is going to utilize AI. Just like the people who invent the internet, who invent the TCP/IP, they are not making money. It is Jeff Bezos who built the online bookshop. It is those people who are utilize the technology making lots of money. So here is the truth for all of us today. For you, or if you're old enough, you have children, for them to do anything, if you think about how to utilize AI as a utility, you are the people that's going to make most of the money. Now the people today working very hard on the technology, but they are great people. We respect them. They will make some money, but more money is coming on the application.
Great, great. No, that's great. A great way to think about it. I like that. I like that utility. I'm going to steal that. You know, it's good. It's a good. So, Chair Guan, you come, and I think, you know, when I think about this, I do think about the utility. We work with companies that are developing the pipes and the infrastructure, and they make a lot of money, the NVIDIAs and the semiconductor companies. But then there are a lot of verticals, of course, that are really trying to get their head around both sort of the regulatory issues around AI and also how to use it, because they're already in heavily regulated sectors like financial services, for example, and we work with a lot of big financial service companies on this. So I think you have a really good perspective on, you know, how a company in a heavily regulated sector thinks about using this new technology, because we're still, at least with Gen AI, you know, we're still at the early stages. There's still some issues around the technology and how reliable it is, and, you know, hallucination and all these things, right? But there are capabilities that can be used every day. I use it every day to, you know, to write letters of recommendation or to summarize, you know, 120-page PDFs. So there are all these really very practical applications. But then in an industry that has to think sort of ahead and how to leverage some of the really, you know, interesting and innovative aspects of this technology, there is an issue of sort of an existing regulatory infrastructure which has to be thought about too, which isn't the case in some industries. So I'd love to get your perspective on sort of how the financial services sector thinks about something as complicated as AI.
Of course, of course. So I would say I always feel that there's a lag between financial industry and technology. So so for me, as a researcher, I closely track the trend of the development of AI. And I started my research on neural networks in 2007. At the time, I tried to use neural network to forecast electricity load. And at the time, there is almost no big difference between using neural networks versus regression model Bayesian methods. And of course, so neural network is a nonlinear method, so there are some advantages, but it's not significant. Then after graduate in 2012, I joined JPMorgan Chase. I was one of the earliest data scientists. So at the time, bank, I think it's just the start of the, I would say focus, or bank start to focus on how to use neural networks, deep learning for financial industry. So I got a good opportunity to, you know, work on the floor to touch different size of data, different type of data, and try to use those deep learning methods to analyze data, to forecast something. And you know what? So using deep learning method, actually, you know, we get some good insights, but that's not enough. So, and then probably, so deep learning, you know, was pretty popular. And then NLP, where natural language start to emerge, or larger models start to emerge. I would say probably 2 years ago, my workload is not that busy. So at that time, we focus on NLP. We use, if you heard of the BERT model, which is smaller language model. So we use it to process a lot of unstructured data, text data. We got some good results, much better than deep learning method. And since the launch of ChatGPT, our life has changed. Now I'm quite busy because we got a lot of demand from different line of businesses. In the beginning of launch of ChatGPT, nobody realized what gonna do, how to use it. But now as we start to use it more and more, we start to realize how powerful the large language model is. And nowadays within the financial industry, we start to use large language model, open source, or use those enterprise GPT model for different type of work. I can share the details later, but we use a tool for risk, for operation, for sales, and to help also investment to figure out what potential opportunities. But I will definitely happy to share the details as we continue.
No, that's great. That's great. So yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note that we think of also of sort of ChatGPT and large language models that the sort of consumers are using, but a lot of the real revolution is within companies leveraging those capabilities across the business model. And of course, that's what's happening in China too, right? I mean, Chinese companies are very good at leveraging these kinds of capabilities. This is where the focus in China almost seems to be more on the business side of things and less on the consumer side. But I think that's probably changing. So back to Jeannette. So we have a good sense now of what sort of AI. It's been around for a long time. There's lots of different pieces to the AI puzzle. But again, we're sort of in the age of Gen AI, where that's getting a lot of attention, and as we'll see, that's also generated a lot of geopolitical issues. But I think one theme we want to tease out here too is how fast the technology is changing. We write a lot for clients how regulators are having a hard time keeping up. Right? They're thinking about ChatGPT, and maybe we'll get into something like agentic AI, which is really in my view, something that may be one of those kinds of really transformative angles to this. So maybe you mentioned a third wave here.
Well,
so
actually, before I get to the third wave, I want to finish off the second wave.
Please.
Because we've talked about natural language processing and large language models, but more generally, we're talking about generative AI techniques. NLP and LLMs are really good for text processing, but we also have generative AI techniques for image processing and image generation, and diffusion models, for instance, that are also taking everyone by the storm. And then you combine these, and then you can create anything. And even the scientific process is at risk, if you will, because people can just write papers and do experiments and with all this generative AI techniques. And so even the science community is a little wary of that because what we can't do is detect something fake from real yet. So in any case, wave 2 is not over. We're still riding it, and there's still a long way to go in 2 directions. First of all, we actually have 0 scientific understanding of why any of this works. 0, which is amazing. This is where experimentation far outruns theory. And as an academic, it's very bothersome that we have no idea of how any of this works, but it works so well. So on the one end, we don't understand why it works. At the other end, we've got every other discipline, sector using it routinely. My own staff at Columbia uses it routinely. It's in their daily work life, and it's helping them, and they like it. Not for everything, but for useful things. So as Larry said, it's a utility. It's already a utility for some people. So that And here I am talking about just the second wave. Now, do you want to hear?
I do want to hear about the third wave.
Now?
Yes.
Okay,
let's-
so it's not a big reveal. It is really about AI in the physical world. So I have a lot of colleagues, because I was at Carnegie Mellon, which has the world's best robotics institute. I have a lot of colleagues who've been working on robots all their lives. And I can tell you, when that funding agency program manager comes for the demo, they're all holding their breath that that robot will actually do the right thing. It's very, very hard to put, you know, AI technology, vision, everything in the physical world and assure that nothing is going to go wrong. Because the physical world is physics. And there's also uncertainty that's very hard to deal with. And I think my favorite example of, there have been a lot of advances in robotics, amazing advances. But my favorite example of a challenge that the roboticists are still working on is manipulation. Holding chopsticks and eating food, Chinese food. Just, not that I think that anyone should go out there and design a robot that does that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying there are challenges still in understanding how to represent and manipulate devices in the physical world. So I think that's the third wave.
No, that's great. That's great. And I think we'll also want to come back to sort of how the agentic, the concept of agents,
Yeah.
and because that also involves the physical world too,
Right.
right, at some level. But so Larry, I'd like to sort of have you draw out a little bit more. So, you know, there is the idea of this utility. How are investors thinking about these, you know, the third wave, and where are investors thinking in terms of, you know, the next killer app here, which you hear a lot about, or in your world, are you thinking more about sort of investing in utilities, right, over the long term that will actually, you know, do pretty well for investors? And how do you sort of think about the next 2 to 3 years in the space?
Number one, the technology is changing very fast, because every year we put in the computation power is tenfold. So every year, the computation or the electricity put in AI is 10 times each year. So the technology evolve very fast. From an investment perspective, still lots of people, which is good, invest in language model, in infrastructure, and we did that too. So that's a critical area. But we're more focusing on the application. In the next couple of years, basically, if you do something repetitive work, with the Industrial Revolution, repetitive physical work pretty much replaced by machine. With AI, with generative AI, any kind of a repetitive, intelligent work, like the white-collar work, is going to be replaced by AI. So what you could see is lots of new demand for new people. At the same time, there's a lot of layoff, even in Silicon Valley. The best university from like Berkeley or somewhere, computer science, they graduate, they cannot find a job. Not everybody, but quite a few computer science students cannot find a job. Can you believe that? Because if you're doing low-level work, if you're doing repetitive work, it's going to be replaced by AI. So that's a real trend happening now and continue to happen in the next few years. So how can we survive as investors? We invest in creative people. AI solve the repetitive work. But if you are creative, I don't mean become an Albert Einstein, just a little bit creative. Do something work for your boss, for your own company, think something a little bit creative will help a lot. If you just go there working very hard, but doing repetitive work, you're going to get laid off. That's just a matter of life. So when we invest, of course we invest in the future, So what we believe the future for everybody here or our children is to become creative. That's it. There's no way out. You can do the repetitive work. It's okay. But you're going to be managed by machine. You're going to be really tired. Just like the people, right? People at the Amazon data warehouse, they're laid off by machines every year, 10%, because they calculate all your work. You're doing repetitive work, that's fine, but they calculate all your work, right? How many boxes you move, how long you go to the restroom. At the end of the year, it's cut. So if you just say, I'm strong, I do physical work, repetitive work, sorry, your life becomes harder because you're managing by AI. Be creative. And there's a lot of opportunities in the creative business. We'll talk about that later. Yeah.
No, great recommendations. Yeah, no, and I think you hit on the sort of these three really critical spaces here: the infrastructure, model development, and application. And I think we're sort of, we've had a lot of emphasis on the first two. I think we're slowly moving into that third space where the creativity is really important. I was in Beijing recently talking to my good friend Kai-Fu Lee, and he has recruited, he was telling me how he recruited for his company, which is looking at agentic AI for consumers, Zero1.ai, and he said, for the infrastructure the best people were from Huawei. Right? And for the model space, they were from Google and Microsoft and Alibaba and Tencent. And then from the application side, they were from ByteDance. Right? So he's looking at that. And again, getting back to that theme this morning that was made, I think, by Mitch, that the company should think about being global, right? He's thinking that this is a global company, right? He's not thinking it's a Chinese company. They very much want to work in the U.S. and outside of China and globally. So this sort of gets us to sort of the geopolitics here too, which is we have these two very, very vibrant economies and AI sectors in the U.S. and China. Really, it's U.S., China, and then big drop down to the third in terms of just the sort of sheer volume of researchers and companies and other things that are really helping to drive AI. So, and of course, at the same time, AI has now become this, particularly in the last 2 years, a very big geopolitical football. And part of that is because in the U.S. government, for example, there's this feeling of that AI and whoever gets to maybe the fourth or fifth wave can get to something called artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence or advanced machine learning, whatever you want to call it, that confers some sort of really definitive advantage in terms of economy or military capabilities. And so for good or for bad, we have these two very vibrant countries and lots of interactions between companies and researchers, but we have increasingly pressure on that issue because the perception in governments now is, this is a really critical technology, and so it needs to be controlled. The inputs need to be controlled, for example. And obviously investment needs to be controlled. The U.S. government, for example, just issued these outbound investment regulations, which will go into effect next January, targeting AI, semiconductors, and quantum computing. And really, in the last 2 years, we've seen technology more broadly put at sort of the center of U.S. China relations in a sort of within the framework of competition. So that obviously complicates all of our lives because we're sort of used to a more open environment, and now we have to think more carefully. So I'd love to hear from each of you how that issue of sort of the politicalization, if you will, of AI how you think about that and how that's affected your work, or some examples that you think are important in that space. So maybe start with you.
Sure,
Jack.
of course. Before I got to a point, so I want to quickly echo with their insights just now. So I think I'm still maybe on the second wave. I'm excited to surf on the third wave. And when I watched the video about the Robot 101 and also Optimus, I was deeply impressed. So I could imagine maybe in the next few years, we're going to see some robot working on the street, and then you can interact with those robots. I'm not surprised. I think the technology is there, so we just need, to do more work to make it happen. And also, I would say, so back to a point that as a researcher, we, within the bank, within the financial industry, as I mentioned, there's a lag. So we pay a lot of attention to our clients, to their data, to make sure it's safe, we cannot, we don't like to disclose our client data or, So right now, so on one side, definitely we are exploring those large language models, those API. When we use them, we sign the agreement with those enterprise corporations. We make sure that our data will not be disclosed. On the other side, we start to look into the open source model, like a Llama model, if you've heard of it. So you can download it, even the full, the one that I think is open source. So you can download it, and then for the recent, since last year, I spent a lot of time to fine tune open source large language model. So we download it on the server, and then we prepare a lot of internal data, and then we fine tune the model so that we can maybe get a similar result of performance as ChatGPT does, so that we can host the agent or different, because we have a lot of different use cases, we can train different agents for different job. And we can save the cost and make sure that, there's no data leakage. And we use those small tools we built for different, I would say, businesses, right? So we can use a tool to highlight those potential risks, right? Because in finance, we have large number of documents, and it's really time consuming to process those large language documents, large documents. So what we have done is we use language model, we use QA, question answering approach, to screen all the documents, and we ask a lot of questions. From there, we can extract a lot of answers for those questions. In the recent months, so we built a tool, we're able to, I work on the ESG side, so we're able to use a tool to extract almost 40,000 data points, valid data points, for 150 metrics. That's a huge number of data points that we can extract from documents and then share with our investment team. We don't use those AI for investment, but we do use it to extract useful information for their consideration.
And do you do that on a global basis?
So far, we majorly focus on U.S. and the EU for my work. Okay. I believe we also have footprints in other countries. I believe maybe some team they use a tool for their daily work, but
no, the reason I ask it, because I want the other panelists to comment on this, is because we're encountering this too with clients where they've developed an application based on a model that was developed in a certain country, shall we say, and then they want to use that model in another country. This is becoming quickly a really tricky issue, and that model, for example, may not have been approved for use in another country. And so many companies are worried that and don't want to be in a world where they have to worry about the sort of origin of the model. A lot of open source models, of course, are being used. Kaifu is using Llama 3 also to develop those applications. Governments are thinking, oh my gosh, do we need to control open source models? Industry is very much against that. So we're sort of in this inflection point where these models are being more widely used, they're more important, governments are recognizing that this is a critical technology, but we don't want to end up in a world where, if I roam to China, I can't use Apple Intelligence, for example, on my phone, right? We all remember having to carry multiple phones back in the, in the days of different standards. So as AI is becoming that utility that Larry mentioned, we want to, and this gets back to another theme we want to talk about, is how do we cooperate among governments and businesses to avoid, the sort of downsides of having bifurcated AI tech stacks. I talk a lot about that, and I think that's a really big issue and a goal that more people need to think about more deeply. But I'd love to hear Larry's thoughts on all this, because I think it affects every part of the AI equation.
Yeah, the geopolitics is really a huge issue. I don't know how many of you here are not worried about geopolitics. See, I love geopolitics, because I love problems. Good entrepreneurs, good investors are problem solvers. 乱世出英雄. That's how Henry Kissinger make money so many years. The foundation is still here, right? Yeah. I believe we all want to be a problem solver. Here is a huge problem. Let's work on it. I love it. So, of course, it's going to be very different. U.S. is really good at 0 to 1. Do you know what Chinese is good at? From 1 to 1,000. When Chinese start to make chips, the chip price is going to be like a cabbage. It's cheap, very soon. So it's very different. The reason is very simple, because in US, whenever you have a serious competition, one of the players will come out, you know what? I'm open source, right? That happened with a mobile phone, right? Apple get ahead. iPhone, how do you catch up? What Google did. Open source, Android. So now, in US, Android has more than 50%. In the world, Android has more than 70% of the market shares. Same thing with open AI, with generative AI, right? You have open AI, which is not open. Then you have a Google. We predict Google or other people will do open source, because as soon as open AI come out, we predict this thing, they get ahead. Other big players will come out and do some open source, just to disrupt, 叫搅局, right? Open source. So Google didn't do it.
But Llama's out there.
Right. Then Facebook come up with a Llama, open source. So now the Chinese company, they will say, oh, we're really good at generative AI. Do you know where the source come from? So Chinese really good at from 1 to 1,000. That happens already on mobile internet, right? The mobile experience in China is so much better. So there's a lot of opportunities. Difference between the two countries are the huge opportunities for every one of us here. A lot of things we can now change between the leaders on top, right? They're pretty far from us. But what we can do is build a bridge. Somebody build a wall, we can build a bridge. That's how the bridge builder has opportunity. If there's no wall, if there's no obstacle, what are we going to do? How can we make money? That's the opportunity. I feel the generative AI will create two very, very different societies. Technology is neutral. Good people use it to emphasize, to amplify their goodness. The bad people use it to amplify their evilness. It's going to be very different. The company will become different. The country will become even more different. Even in the US, we are so-called, divided country. You know what? We're going to divide more. That's about technology. Just remember, we're going to divide more and more, which is a good thing, because there's a lot of opportunities to build a bridge. We are bridge builders. We are problem solvers. I love problem solvers. If you or your children are problem solvers, we invest.
Thank you. Well said. Building bridges. I love it. Good. Jeannette.
Yeah, I actually like to think because I trained as an engineer, I'm a problem solver too. I wanted to make two comments. First of all, I completely agree about the 0 to 1 and 1 to 1,000. I think Kai-Fu Lee, actually in his AI Superpowers book, made an analogy or even said something like that. And I do encourage people to read that book because he was one of the first people to talk about the two internets. And are we moving in that direction? And now your question, are we going to have two AI stacks or AI, however you want, worlds? It's a good question. And it would be nice if we didn't go there. But I don't know. Now, you asked me specifically about how does the U.S. China geopolitical situation affect me and my world. And unfortunately, it's with me every day because I oversee research for the entire university, and research is a highly regulated sector. We get a lot of rules and regulations that come from our federal funding agencies that tell us must do that, can't do that, and we have to follow all the rules, and more rules have come down on us, on our researchers, on the institutions, with respect to this kind of technology, quantum and semiconductors as well, just as you were saying, Paul. And it's relentless. And the scrutiny that we're getting from the federal funding agencies and the scrutiny that the federal funding agencies are getting from Congress and with the new administration, I expect even more. So this is not going to go away anytime soon. I try to protect the researchers, and I try to, of course, protect the university, but I just anticipate more and more of these externalities, making life harder for us. And the last comment I'll make is, I have been saying for many years, since this change, that I feel it's very important for the U.S. and China to collaborate. And compete is fine. Competition is good. It's innovation. But collaboration and partnerships really means you can build on each other's shoulders. Moreover, this is more of a geopolitical statement. I'm in a situation where I'm actually afraid to go back to China and visit and talk to academic colleagues because of all this federal stuff going on. And what does that mean? It means when experts in the US ask me, how far ahead is China in AI? I can't really answer because I haven't gone back to China in a while, and I'm afraid to. And if I do go, I'm certainly not going to talk about AI. So we're in that very precarious situation.
That's a really great point. And and I actually have tried to make that point that, to argue for collaboration is that, both sides need to know where the other side is. Because if the fear is somebody's going to get to AGI or ASI first, would you like to not be surprised by that? Even though I'm a little skeptical that it's going to be that's what's going to happen.
I wouldn't worry so much about AGI. Yeah. Even if we don't get to AGI, it's everything else.
Right. Well, but the problem is right now a lot of I was on a closed door session a couple weeks ago with a researcher, and I said, well, why is the U.S. government so obsessed with AI, and what's the problem here? And his response was interesting. He said, look, all the major AI labs, they're all developing virtual software engineers based on generative AI models. And it's not going to happen tomorrow, but in a few years, they'll be able to deploy 1 million software developers versus, say, a couple hundred. And that will accelerate the progress on getting towards something like that we might call AGI. And so therefore, the U.S. government needs to slow China down, right? So this is the sort of genie that's out of the bottle here. And so the challenge then is trying to find those, to keep the collaboration going, make those arguments that the other argument is sort of a moral argument, that if you do have a situation where you have to devote resources inefficiently because you're trying to develop two different AI stacks, then that's going to slow progress. And if we believe AI is going to help us solve some of the existential problems like climate change, et cetera, that shouldn't the U.S. and China be working together on those and not wasting resources and effort, right? So that's sort of where we are. I mean, I think that I agree that the new Trump administration is probably going to, things are probably going to get worse before they're better, but I think that finding those areas of collaboration, we're trying to propose areas like, medical research, and I mean, there are, both sides can agree, I think, on many areas where there shouldn't be, competition shouldn't be the driving factor there, but it's still tricky because of that idea that any progress in any area of AI could contribute, to this this idea of an arms race.
There's another ironic statement I want to make, which is, of course, many U.S. research institutions of higher education rely on international students. Many of those are from China. We have, of course, seen a decrease in the number of Chinese students, graduate students and undergraduates on our campuses. But the irony is, in graduate school especially, and especially in the STEM fields, we need the Chinese students to compete with China.
Right. That's a, right.
If I could
yeah, no, jump in.
Yeah, so I also, in the past 3 years, I also got many opportunities to work and collaborate with universities. And what I observe is, there are a lot of good students, and including Chinese students. They do a fantastic job. But especially in the recent few years, when they graduate, even they are very, very good, but they have a limitation to stay here to continue their excellent research. For me, I feel sorry about it, but I couldn't help much.
That's another good point. So they go back to China.
Yeah, they go back to China and then join maybe Baidu and Tyson, and then,
But then you see, no wonder the U.S. taxpayers will get mad, right?
Right. No, these are all great points, and I think a lot of food for further discussion. But I think that as we look at this issue, I think it's incumbent upon all of us to think of ways to keep that collaboration going. I made a recommendation in 2020 to the National Security Committee on AI that collaboration between Chinese researchers and U.S. researchers on AI not be, the target of any sort of restrictions, and of course that's tricky, right? Because as you've noted, the campus, and the sort of scrutiny of these things has really gone way up, and so some of this happens just because people don't want to do research in a potentially hostile environment. So but I think that's still we have to still keep our eyes on the opportunities. The comments that Mitch made this morning, Mitch Resnick, and I thought were really good, that the old sort of paradigm, we need a new way to think about this issue, this competition. We're going to have competition, but there's still there's a lot of desire in the business community to keep these ties going. That's what I find, right? I mean, nobody in the business community is still supportive of that relationship. It's more complicated for them.
Can I just say,
Yeah,
it's really refreshing and gratifying to hear that.
Yeah.
Because I sometimes think we in academia are all alone in this.
No.
And to have the business community be supportive of a positive U.S.-China relationship is really great to hear.
I think that will be tested in the next 4 years, but I think that there's still a reservoir there that I see, and again, it depends on the sector and the business. But we work with companies across the business community, and I think there's still this hope that we can get back that as Mitch said, we need a new paradigm for interaction here, right? I mean, we're not going back to the days before the pandemic. We're not going to go back to that. But we need a new way to coexist, and for businesses to be able to have clarity around, what the rules are and what they can do. So it's a really important point. And AI, I think, is really the hard part about AI is that it's become, just in the last 2 years, this sort of existential piece to it. But again, there I think that it's important that regulators work together. We do a lot of work. I participate in some track twos. I'll be in China next week talking about how do the U.S. and China collaborate on AI governance. And again, I'm a little more hopeful there because, again, I think there is a recognition that, you know, if you leave China out of this discussion, how can you possibly have a global framework for any kind of you know, regulation of AI? And the UK government, for example, has been very forward-leaning in this, in insisting that China participate in multilateral fora around AI, and I find that very encouraging. So there's, and again, the scientists, there's a lot of sort of non-government to government collaboration going on, so that the governments are, I think, going to have to catch up to, because there is that desire in the scientific community, I think, not to have this really big break. So anyway, let's. I think we're running low on time. Do we want to take questions from the audience? Is that something we? Yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and take some questions, please. Is there a microphone?
I guess my question is both for Larry, Lee, and the professor. Do you foresee any innovation will be the utility? So instead of the kind of challenging to the existence of humankind? I guess there's a great length of talking about the negative side of the AI, right? So especially, I think, seems like Elon Musk, he sincerely believes AI are more intelligent than human being. So if we thinking fast forward, like many generations later, the AI, are they the utility of the humankind, or they're really the challenge for humankind? Thanks.
Yeah, as an investor by nature, I'm optimistic. To get back to your point, first we go to the geopolitics. Only Nixon can go to China because he is a Republican and anti-communism. A lot of people here worry about Trump. Personally, I like it or not, it's not important. He might be a person that can get along better with China. Just look and see. There will be a lot of up and downs, but he has the power. The Democrats talk all the beautiful word that stop them from working with China. That's a problem. For Donald Trump, if he can work with the person in North Korea, he can work with anybody. That might be an opportunity. I don't mean it's going to happen, but major international event happens by accident. Remember that. You cannot foresee it, right? The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. We didn't foresee that. The Soviet Union attacked, the Nazi attacked Soviet with a treaty, right? Now, kind of disalignment, but the Nazi attacked Soviet Union. That's not predicted. Same thing here. Whatever happened in Taiwan, we talk about in the morning. I agree a lot, but the number one I don't agree is it's going to happen by accident. Just remember, whatever major international event will happen by accident, not by prediction by people, or by people like us. Number one. Number two, about AI. I'm very optimistic, very optimistic. Number one is, no matter what happens, human nature will never change. The goodness and badness, the evilness inside us will never change. There will always be people with good intention. It's always there, number one. Number two, what happened U.S. China technology-wise? I talk about utility, right? The utility here is very good. The water is clean. I live in Palo Alto. The tap water is real good. You know what? The water in China is really bad. You cannot drink it without boiling it. But my parents are still there. They're 90 years old. I don't even know I can live to 90 years old, right? The utility is not that good, but you know, they survived. Same thing with AI. Remember, AI the quality of the data, about the training, about the chips, about the power, a lot of things. The utility, the quality may not be as good as the US. You know what? Many people will survive really well, just like my parents. They can survive.
That's a great analogy. I'm going to steal that one too.
So that's an analogy. So I think if you think about utility, then you understand how things will happen. Back to the future of a human being. Yesterday, I took my daughter, before I met my good friend Shirley, I took my daughter to the cosmetic store. There's so many different kinds of cosmetic. That's cosmetic. In the future, in the 3-year, 2-year, 5-year, do you know what will happen? There will be a lot more CEOs. There will be a lot more people can start a company. Do you know why? Because of the utility. At year 2000, when you start a computer company, you have to build a server literally in your own room. Right now, with computer, you can connect to internet. AI, same thing. Right now, only few people use AI. Later on, you start something, AI is right there. You just pay a few dollars a month, you use AI. So the world will be very diversified. 10,000 years ago, we all dressed the same clothes, a piece of leather. Today, see how different. What's the color look like, the clothes? Cosmetics, same thing with a lot of things. There will be a lot more different kind of requirement. The world, the society will be much more fragmented. This fragmentation provides a lot of opportunity for you to start your own company. There will be a lot more requirement. You know what I say? Human nature will now change. You are not satisfied. The only satisfactory comes from you perform better within your circle. Your satisfaction comes from your relative position in your organization. Your happiness on the street depends on the relative position you are in the society. That defines, as a human being, everybody always asks for more, no matter how advanced the technology. When they ask more, as everybody here, you have an opportunity to provide more. So there will be a lot more business coming up. You talk about AI today, you're concerned, right? You say, oh, if I joined OpenAI 2 years ago, if I do something 2 years ago, I'll be rich. No, today is just the beginning. If you think about AI, today is the ground zero. We just started today. Just think about this way. While you do anything, the opportunity is far ahead.
Okay.
Huge opportunity. And I have a million followers, so I cannot stop. Let me stop by myself.
I think it's safe to say that Larry is not an AI doomer, okay? Larry is an AI optimist. But I think Elon is a really complicated figure here, and I think Elon may be the hope for U.S. China relations in the second Trump administration, but also Elon is also in a weird position of being somewhat concerned about the potential for a future of superintelligence, but at the same time, he's building a 100,000 GPU data center in Memphis to train
And I
Grok.
think he still has a Tesla factory in Shanghai, right?
Right. So I would like to know, because you said you had studied with Jeff Hinton, I would like to know, because there is this big debate, more in the US, I think, than in China, about the existential risk. And of course, we have the three fathers of machine learning coming down slightly differently. Yann LeCun is very much of the view that humans can control and engineer and will understand, and models won't get out of control and won't suddenly have agency. Whereas Jeff Hinton and Yoshua Bengio take a more pessimistic view, if you will, that potentially we need to be concerned about the existential risks of an advanced artificial intelligence. So I'd love to see where Jeannette comes down on this.
I fall down more on the line of Yann LeCun and
I definitely
our
am
optimist Larry. There's always a non-zero chance, but that doesn't mean humanity is going to break down. And so I love your analogy with your 90-year-old parents. They drink bad water, but they're still alive. So I'm an optimist, and yeah.
Okay, well we won't get too deep in that. Please jump in.
I'm also very optimistic, so maybe I can share another simple analogy. So 20 years ago, when Microsoft Office tool was issued, people with the skill of Microsoft Office tools have advantages against people they don't have. nowadays, people with the advantage of using AI skills have more advantages of people who don't. So again, so definitely I believe there'll be more regulations in the future, but I'm optimistic. Maybe in 10 years I will lose my job, as Larry mentioned. So, but I'm happy because this means I'm doing a good job.
Thank you. Great, great. Okay. That's great. What a great discussion. I want to thank the panelists. I share your optimism. I think the humans will remain in control and will leverage AI for good. So thank you, everybody, for listening, and thanks to the panel. Great, great.